So, this video has been on my mind lately, and just something I wanted to just talk about real fast. It's just kind of a subject because I've kind of seen this on this studio on an interesting trajectory, and it's either going to go one of two ways for this group. Obviously, I'm talking about Blumhouse, and today we're going to be talking about Blumhouse. Basically, we're going to be talking about, is Blumhouse just hitting a rough patch, or is this the beginning of the end? Now, I'm not going to do a whole doom and gloom thing, but I am going to stress some points here and there that I did want to talk about in regards to Blumhouse. Now, as we all know, Blumhouse is, when it comes to horror, you think Blumhouse. And Blumhouse is known for a lot of great films and franchises. Obviously, Sinister, Insidious, the Invisible Man remake, obviously the Purge films, which have their own franchise that I've never cared for, but it has a fan base. Obviously, bringing back Halloween, Five Nights at Freddy's, and we'll all get to that in a minute. But lately, we've seen in the past few months a decline in quality. It's been more quantity over quality for Blumhouse. You see, it really hits with Halloween Kill. I really feel like it hits with Halloween Kills, although they did have a few movies in between that were like, okay, that was good. But then you watch the last three in conjunction: Exorcist Believer, Night Swim, and fucking Imaginary. The only thing we wish we could imagine was not seeing that movie come to fruition. Now, again, I'm not going to spout doom and gloom because there is a lot of good here. I mean, and another thing I will say, Five Nights at Freddy's sucks. That movie sucked. I know that made a lot of money, but that movie sucked really bad. I think it was just carried by fan base, but that's just me. So there's a lot. Blumhouse has been having a rough patch of films, and it isn't the first time. And the thing that really saved them is that they don't really spend a lot of money on these films and get back even more. I think even Imaginary, as bad as it did break even at the very least. So there is something to be said that this business plan of spending less and making more has gotten them out of Blumhouse out of a major jam. But the thing of it is that business practice can't last forever. Eventually, people are going to get wise to it. And now the other thing that's made people kind of not so much, elate with joy as it once did, is this news that they're going to be working exclusively with, they're going to be working with Lionsgate now and kind of perusing through their properties as well. The first being a remake of, I think they've, I've heard two things. It's either going to be a remake or a new, requel to Blair Witch. So, yeah. And normally people would be, all elated by that news, oh man, Blumhouse doing Blair Witch, that's awesome. But now, all I've seen on the internet is, yikes. Now again, Blumhouse has come out with some good along with the bad recently. Obviously, Megan, while I thought it was just okay, did give us a new horror character and as a sequel that could be good. You also have the likes of you have obviously Invisible Man that came out. You have they've worked with Jordan Peele's films, all of that. But as you've seen, it feels like they've gotten cocky. It really does feel like Blumhouse has gotten cocky and just wants to churn out these low budget films to corner a quick profit. And there was another two studios that kind of had the same business practice: Universal Studios and, more importantly, Hammer Films. See, it's very interesting that it feels like history is repeating itself, at least, and this was the main reason why I wanted to make this video, because I was starting to see a pattern with Blumhouse and in the past with both Universal and then Hammer Studios. That was kind of the big reason why I wanted to make this video, was because, you see, when initially, as we all talk about the Universal monsters, let's start with the Universal first, because that's the granddaddy of it all. The Universal monsters at the beginning were treated as these big films and grandiose films that did have a lot of love to them. But then, after the Laemmles sold it to another company, they weren't interested in horror and only got interested again when people were like seeing re-releases of Dracula and Frankenstein and saw how much money they made, so they released it in the but not in the same vein. Oh sure, we got, because of that we got the Wolfman and the official start of the the first cinematic universe, and we got others like Son of Frankenstein and the Frankenstein meets the Wolfman, the first crossover film. But therein lies here's the other thing that I think people don't talk about with that, is that at that point, the company at the time, the Universal heads at the time, thought of the Universal Monsters as not this grandiose film, but more like a quick buck they could make and churn out these fast movies and get a bigger profit. Doesn't that sound familiar? And basically what it happened was that they became more B movies up until, House of Dracula, and then they just kind of lumped in Creature from the Black Lagoon, who was like the last spark of it, but that was like a solid decade after House of Dracula, the last Universal monster movie. And yeah, and again, those films, I'm not knocking those films, I'm just saying, like, that's just kind of the cold reality, is they were more interested in churning out these quick buck, low budget movies that didn't have that same kind of feel. A lot of them didn't anyway. And then they were getting diminishing returns. And then we come to that same practice came to Hammer Horror. And Hammer Studios did do did movies outside of horror, but once they hit it big with Dracula and Frankenstein, just like Universal, isn't that funny? They hit the ground running with horror films and were like a juggernaut in the 50s and 60s for horror. And then it came that they didn't know when to stop and also say it with me now, cheaper films for a bigger budget, for big returns, and the quantity overmatched the quality of those films. And we saw a massive decline with Hammer Studios that ultimately kind of economically damaged the company for a while. So, yeah. So Blumhouse, it feels like, again, when I say history feels like it's repeating itself, I mean it. Like, I've seen this before, twice actually. And it's not just this, and I know what someone's going to say in the comments, so I'll beat you to it. Oh, Marvel's doing the same thing where they're doing quantity over quality. And we could make that argument, but no. Like, that's a can of worms we'll talk about another time. I'm talking, the reason why I'm bringing this up is exclusively for horror. Like, it's very clear that it's following the same kind of pattern of, these horror films. I should have preferenced that earlier, But that's been kind of what I've been seeing with Blumhouse, is that they will put out a product, not really give much thought to it, give it a cool tagline, and just slap it out there, just because they put it at PG-13 most of the points so they can get a broader audience to make their money back. But now between, the dismal failure of Exorcist Believer, as well as, Night Swim did make a lot of money back, but it was panned, and then people got wise when Imaginary came out, although again it did still break even, so there's that. But now people are like after this little string, I would lump in Five Nights at Freddy's, but that made a lot of money. That made a lot of money in return, even though that was a piss poor movie. So this string of films that have come out like months apart, keep that in mind. That's another thing. These movies have been boom, boom, boom consistently. Like, what was it? Five Nights, then Exorcist, then Night Swim, then Imaginary. All of those films, like, only months apart, really. So, now people are starting to get wise because, it's very clear that, that they're not putting a lot of effort into especially Imaginary, and especially Night Swim. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying Blumhouse is, like, doomed to it, but I do see the warning signs that, like, they don't seem to give a shit, as long as they're making money. But I will say that, like, I think as long as they get the right creative teams, they'll be fine. I mean, again, I'm still excited for the Wolfman, mostly not because it's Blumhouse, but because Lee Whannell came back to do this. He came back from leaving this project, came back to do it. You know, the guy who did the remake of The Invisible Man. You know, the thing they always tout from the studio that brought you The Invisible Man. Don't you remember The Invisible Man? Yeah, you gotta remember The Invisible Man. It was a good movie, right? Right? You like that? You gotta like this, right? So yeah, it just and I know some people are gonna be like, oh, the Blumhouse is dying because of wokeness. I was like, no, it's literally the same business practice that killed horror for a while, at least for gothic horror for a while in both Universal and Hammer. Those studios really predicated themselves, especially Hammer. I see a lot of more of Hammer than Universal and Blumhouse. Although, again, Universal does kind of share that same fate. But yeah, that's what I like. You really saw that Hammer put all their eggs in one basket into horror, and then yeah, you can be a horror studio, but like as long as you're churning out a good product. But by the point we were on a decline. Like, they were on a very much decline and still didn't want to branch out, try anything, or try to correct the ship. And it was more about quantity over quality. Again, that was the same thing with Universal that killed the Universal monsters in the 40s. You know? So again, but again, do I think Blumhouse is in danger of closing down? No. At least not now. At least not right now. They kind of need to step up their game here. Like, I really hope that, like, this is just a rough patch. You know, I'm really hoping this is a rough patch, and we can all, like, look back on this and be like, man, I was wrong on that. I'm not even making a prediction. I'm just saying, like, they're going down a road that I have seen twice already, and it could be, you know, it could be disastrous if there's no course correction. That's all I'm saying. But what do you guys think? Do you guys think Blumhouse is just hitting a rough patch? Or do you think this is we'll be talking about Blumhouse like we did the classic Universal Monsters and Hammer Studios? Just comment below, let me know. Other than that, hope you all enjoyed this. I'm Mr. Multiverse. I'll see you next time in the Multiverse.